part of the reason why we name this talk the physics of choice. Why would we use the word physics? And that's sort of a interesting bit of language that people have been like, huh, what's that mean? And why are you using that word? And why are you saying it in that manner? And really the origins of that title come from the fact that what we're going to talk about tonight are things that I will call axioms, right? What's an axiom? An axiom is a self-evident truth. Okay, it's something that appears true no matter which way you look at it from, right? So we could say that something like gravity is axiomatic. Okay, no matter how we test gravity, it responds in consistent ways under application in all kinds of forms. Okay, so the things that we want to talk about tonight are things that Colin and I have identified over the years as axioms of good decision making, right? What are people who feel like they consistently are making good decisions base those decisions upon? And how do they arrive at that place where they consistently make really good decisions about things, right? And then what is a good decision? Right? What does that even mean? Is it something, subjective to each of us? Is there something objective about what makes a decision good or bad? Are there both? Is it a subjective element because we're all unique individuals? Is there sort of an objective factual element to it because, well, when I make a good decision, it doesn't matter what it's about, and this person, and Colin makes a good decision, then what did we do that was similar, right? And did that thing that we did that was similar contribute to the fact that we both felt like we made good decisions? So all of those things are the kinds of ideas that we're trying to identify. And I love math and I love physics, and physics is full of axioms and formulas, consistencies, right? That we can say, hey, I can take this idea and apply this formula in all these different variable situations. No matter what kind of pressure I put it under, it performs, it shows up, and it delivers the same result all the time. So that's where that idea has sort of come from. The other thing that influences so much of, certainly my approach to these kinds of topics, and with Colleen's great input, I get to refine those things and check her, bounce those things off her and sharpen them, is martial arts. And most of you that know me know that martial arts is a very big part of my life, and that we run a martial arts school as well as the other things that we do. And why that's so beautiful is because, well, for a whole bunch of reasons, love martial arts, is that jiu-jitsu is very axiomatic as well, right? It has lots of fundamental principles. Okay, and that's where we get into technique and application, right? We always want to be interested in finding out how things work when we are putting them to the test. And one of the beautiful things I've loved about jiu-jitsu for the last, over 4 decades, in participating in it as a practitioner, as a student, as a teacher, which just means I'm an experienced student, really, because I'm constantly always learning, is that following the principles of jiu-jitsu allow people who don't think that they're as powerful as they could be to be more powerful than they ever thought. And it also teaches people that their individual ability and strength isn't really as big of a match against technique and principles as they might think that it is. So it's a wonderful place to build two incredibly important factors, and a way to build two incredibly important factors that I think, and we've observed with people that we work with in many forms, build the ability to make good decisions, right? Those two factors are humility and confidence, right? So if you've got a high degree of humility, right, you can put your ego aside to be open and listening and seek to understand whomever you're engaged with. That's humility. It has nothing to do with being humiliated or being small. Actually, being humble takes a tremendous amount of presence and strength. If you've got that combined with confidence, which is the certainty in your ability to execute an action in a positive direction, well, then the tendency is that you've also got a high degree of self-worth. If you've got humility, confidence, and self-worth, the tendency is that you're going to be a person that makes decisions that they consider good, they can be peaceful with. Okay? So one of the things that...
This first?
Yes, of course.
And for those of you who are like my normal tendency, consistently has been, I'm terrible. I've always been terrible at making decisions. I'm the one that, thank goodness is when I was a kid that we lived really far up north and there were no restaurants, because I was horrible in a restaurant because everybody would choose and I'd still be humming and hawing. And that's just food. So if, as Dana's saying all this, if you're going, oh my God, I don't know if I have enough confidence, oh no, I don't know if I have this and that lined up, you don't have to. That's why we're putting in the parameters, because this is, just like Dana was talking about with the dojo, when Dana talks about doing things at the dojo, you can see it on him. He's like, that's my happy place. I go there and I get calm. And you see it. And you can see it when he's sparring with somebody. As soon as somebody takes a swing at him, everything drops away and he gets really calm. And his decisions come very easily from then. If any of you have seen me in the dojo with my very, very hard-earned black belt, which I have suffered for, I'm choosing suffering deliberately.
And earned, very honestly, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Still to this day, when somebody swings at me when we're sparring, my instinct is to do that and say, I'm a good person, why are you trying to hit me? So you don't have to be calm, cool, and collected with all the confidence in the world to be able to have a black belt, because they are replicable, duplicable skills that, as long as you know what they are, you can just keep applying them. Same with this, same with making choices. You don't have to be suave, debonair, full of confidence in order to be able to make good decisions. You just have to have a framework you can continue to use. And
I have to go here to say that you make great choices. You chose me.
But I'm bummed. Although, I concur.
I'm blessed and lucky every day that Colleen has chosen me, actually, and will happily say that to anybody. Luckiest guy in the world. So that's great, and why I always love, having Call to bounce these things off of and guide our discussions, because together we're a pair of eyes, right? She sees so many things, and has a focus that is different than mine, but we round each other out beautifully, and it's really, really quite a lovely experience for us, and we're happy to share it with you. So what I want to just sort of build off really quick with what Call said is that great points. Humility, confidence, and self-worth are all things you can build, right? They're all things you can build. You can actually get in command of and get better at experiencing and build those techniques, let's call them, those skills, those ideas, if you understand what it is to do and the mechanisms by which you build those things. So that's also part of what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight, and those things will kind of overlap. Self-worth and their relationship to, making good choices, right? When you have self-worth, you take care of yourself. When you take care of yourself and you're in that mindset, then you want to do things that are going to be effective for you, right? And that's sort of the idea that we're going to launch from. One of these axioms, these principles that I'm talking about that I experience in real time in the dojo is really simple, and I want to share it with you, and I hope it gives you some really clear illumination as to, the direction we're going. We have a saying in the dojo that says, when my opponent pushes me, right, I pull, right? When my opponent pulls me, I push. Okay? And to a person experienced in jiu-jitsu, that makes so much sense in terms of real application that it's something that we all just strive to automatically duplicate, right? That idea of I'm being pushed. Well, if this person's pushing me this way, I'm going to pull them this way. If they're pulling me that way, I'm going to push them in the direction that they're pulling me. And part of the reason why we all sort of land in really strong adherence to that principle is because it works. It's super effective. But what's also very interesting about it is it's kind of confounding, right? Because anybody that I know, and Call can attest to this as well, for sure, I was a beginner in martial arts at one point, and anybody that I know that starts in martial arts and, wants to learn about, what martial arts is and isn't, or experiences the exact opposite of what I just said. They're like, oh, well, somebody's pushing me. I want to push back, right? I want to lean into it, okay? Somebody's pulling me. I want to pull in the opposite direction because I'm going to win, right? They're not going to take control of me. I'm going to best them. And it's so amazing when you see a person who is focused on pushing when they're being pushed, and a person who's focused on pulling when they're being pulled in the hands of someone who responds to them, and we're going to get into that language in a second as well too, with the opposite of what they're expecting, i.e., right, this person starts to pull, or starts to pull, right? This person starts to pull, and we're both doing this, right? We're both going like this. Okay, that's what the expectation is. Why? Because that's how most people react, right? Most people react with the same kind of force, I'm using that word deliberately too, that's being applied to them, right, in the moment. So if someone's pushing me, well, I'm not going to let you push me. I'm going to push back, right? Someone's pulling at me. I'm not going to let that person pull me in the direction they want to go. I don't want to go that way. I'm going to pull back in the opposite direction. When you see a person who knows how to respond, okay, that's the other R word that we're going to use here, reacting versus responding. You watch that person who's determined to push, all of a sudden have someone who's going to respond to them by pulling, right? Doing the opposite of what their reaction would say to do. How much ease the person who's responding has in controlling the person who's forcing the push. Right? Vice versa, it works in the other way as well too. The person who is pulling, when you go in to grab someone and you go to grab them by their gi, it's called the gi in jiu-jitsu, and you're trying to yank them in a direction with you. Okay, and then you see that person, if somebody's trying to pull me, if I was trying to pull Colleen, okay, and then all of a sudden Colleen relaxes and just like pushes in the direction that I'm pulling her, the amount of control that she gains from using the power that I'm generating to yank her, and the force I'm generating to yank her in the direction I want her to go is amazing, because she's not resisting. That's the third R word, right? React, respond, resist. She's not resisting the energy that I'm putting towards her. She's moving with it. Okay? There's so many cool things about that apply to decision making. And what we talk about in jiu-jitsu all the time is that jiu-jitsu is really the practice of high-level decision making, very refined decision making, under the pressure of dire physical consequence. Right? And that's why it's so incredibly powerful in what it teaches you about how to make decisions. So many of the things we're talking about tonight come from that very simple principle, right? So I want to challenge you. And we're not trying to convince you of anything. We're just sharing information, because it's information that we apply in our own lives all the time and find very effective. I'm challenging you, and we're challenging you right now, to just contemplate that for a second. Go out and think about, okay, so, all right, well, is my natural reaction if somebody pushes me to push back? Okay, whether that answer is yes or no, you're going to learn something about yourself. Okay, well, what if I'm, open to the idea that what Dana and Colleen are presenting to us tonight actually does apply to making good decisions and might work. The idea that if somebody pushes at me, well, why don't I just pull them in the direction that they want to go, right? And take the initiative to do that, instead of reacting only in the direction that they're reacting to me, right? This is where we start to intersect with the idea of choice. When we are constantly reacting to something that somebody's doing to us, all we can do, generally speaking, and there's some exceptions to this idea, but to get the idea grounded and start the conversation, all we can do is react to what they do by doing what they've done to us, right? They push me, I push them back. Right? They grab me and pull me, I grab and pull them back, right? That's a very, very, very binary way, very black and white way of looking at choice, particularly as looking at choice as a tool of navigation through obstacles in life. Right? It starts to get kind of hard when you think about it. It's a very limited scope, right? When we think about being responsive, right, we are opening up the whole magnitude and plethora of choice that's available to us. So what does that look like in a very practical manner? Someone comes up and pushes me. Well, if I'm reacting, all I can do is push back. If I'm being responsive, I can stop and decide what I want to do next. Is it best for me to push them back? Is it best for me to ask them why they pushed me? Do I want to instead just walk away? Do I want to step to the left and look at them? Do I want to step to the right and look at them? Do I want to take a step back and then ask them why they pushed me? Right? You get the idea that all of a sudden, when we are capable of being responsive, a whole vast array of choices opens up to us. Why is that important? Well, that's important in a very simple manner, which we'll continue to expand on as we go along. Okay? If I react to someone, it's very similar to me doing this. Right? I can only see one half of the dynamic that's occurring. Right? So if I do that, I can't see Colleen. Okay, I'm having a harder time seeing all of you with any kind of depth. I can't judge where you are. I can't judge what your reactions are, what your responses are, what your intent is, right? But if I've got both eyes working and looking at the whole situation, I'm not only seeing, I'm seeing 360 degrees of the scenario that's in front of me, right? I can see, and one of the things that's kind of important about that is the idea of peripheral vision. That's an important thing too. And I don't mean to get too physical about it, but it applies in terms of the energy behind why peripheral vision is important. So if I do this and I cover my eye, I can't see Colleen here beside me at all. Okay? In other words, that monocular view, and just go with me on this one for a second, can feel very isolating and lonely. Right? That's the space that we're in when we're reactive. As a matter of fact, when we get into fight or flight mode, what tends to happen physiologically is our vision goes like this. We tunnel vision, right? Because we're just focused on the thing that's right in front of us. We cannot see the context. We have a hard time reading the depth, and we can't see all the pieces that are going on around us. Okay, emotionally and energetically, that's kind of what we end up doing when we react to something. We can only see from one angle, and it gets tough to judge things accurately from there.
Some people are caught up. Some people would like examples. Some people are following. Some people are a little confused.
Sure.
So I'll just re-explain it this way? And
Absolutely.
See if that helps.
That's beautiful.
So my guess for the people who are confused is that you tend to, because a couple of other people have private messaged me, you tend to, again, your reaction tends to be probably closer to my reaction, which is in the world of all the F's that we talk about, the fight, flight, freeze, fit in, and fawn, you're probably more of a freeze or flight person like I am. Dana's more of a fight person. So, and I mean not for fun. Or, well...
Only with bad guys.
So, part of what happens, even if this is going a little too fast for you, is your brain goes, I'm not catching this. Oh my goodness, I'm not catching this. There's something wrong. Must be wrong with me. What's wrong? And everything freezes. Which oddly puts you in one of the best places to understand exactly what we're talking about here. Because that's what happens in your brain when something comes up and there's a choice to make that you don't feel resourced enough to make. You go into freeze mode. You go into panic mode. You go into, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And that's a reaction. And what we're looking at doing is building in the space for a response. And in that response, you get that moment to take a breath. You get that, 3 breaths technically resets your nervous system, resets your physiology, and you can actually be calmer. And in that moment, you can start to get your brain out of freeze mode or flight mode and into processing mode. And even if all that happens is that a little bit of your brain remembers the idea of how to make choices, suddenly you've got some space. This example?
Mm-hmm.
And again, classic predator-prey responses, I respond like prey. That's my instinct. And it wasn't that long ago that there was a scuffle over a parking spot, and this very angry gentleman was so upset at me. He was so upset at me. And I could feel my heart rate go up, I could feel my breathing get fast, and I could see that his hands were clenched. And everything in me, not consciously, I wasn't yelling, run away, but everything in me was feeling like run away. That's not a good place to make a choice from. So that's him saying, I'm going to fight. And my brain was going, oh God, I guess I have to fight. I don't know how to fight, so I'm going to freeze. And instead, in that moment, I gave myself just a second to take a couple of breaths. And while I did, I looked down at his hand, and I noticed that as he unclenched his hand for a second, his hand was really shaking. And I went, oh, he knows he's in the wrong. Oh, he's in fight mode because he knows he's being kind of a jerk-faced jerk. That's a technical term that some of you remember from last time.
Very high level.
We can explain it later if anyone doesn't know. And that gave me enough space to choose how I was going to respond rather than just going along with what he wanted, rather than turning tail and running, rather than getting into the fight that he seemed to want to have. Does that make a little bit more sense? For that idea of, yeah? Okay.
I have to say as well, too, that in that instance, I wasn't here, actually, which was interesting that the timing of it, the way it worked out. But Colleen responded to that situation beautifully. She handled it so well because she stayed responsive, right? And, we're painting with some broad strokes here right now, and we're going to keep getting more and more specific as we start to understand and apply the mechanics around what leaves us prone to reaction, what builds momentum and strengthens us towards towards being responsive and responding. And I want to applaud you all if at any point in any way any of this has gotten any of you a little bit amped up. Okay. It's not the goal to do that, but it is a necessity of understanding how to make the transition from being reactionary to being responsive to get comfortable with that feeling, right? And what are we talking about? We're talking a little bit about that sort of adrenaline response, right? And we say again all the time in the dojo, the idea that what we're training to do in the dojo in a very specific way, in a physicalized sense, is to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and to get peaceful with the chaotic, right? So think about those two statements and think about how many times, never mind anybody trying to get into a physical fight with you, in any way, shape, or form. It's not about that. But with coworkers, with partners of any kinds, business, romantic or otherwise, with friends, with strangers, where we get into these disagreements or these misunderstandings, right? Or these potential conflicts. Okay, we're going to still get that same kind of adrenalized feeling, okay, about making the wrong choice. That's really what it kind of comes down to. It's like, well, did I react? Did I respond correctly? Did I react in the right way? Okay, so with that idea, we're going to kind of start segueing into a bit more of the specifics of what the physics are, what the mechanics are of how we can determine whether we're making a good choice and we can feel peaceful about it, or whether we're not making a good choice and we can feel, enturbulated or guilty or ashamed of it. And those are three words that start with A that are relatively simple. Okay, we're going to kind of go through them, define them, and talk about the potential of how they kind of play into making good decisions, right? Making choices that we can stand behind, right? Choices that feel true to us. The first one is acknowledgement, right? The idea of acknowledging something, okay? And this topic is really vast, so don't feel pressured or worried about, getting all this super clear in your mind. Right now, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg and introducing these ideas to you for your own contemplation. If you want to write some stuff down, awesome, but don't stress about it. Better to just kind of be engaged and listening than worrying about trying to keep track of everything, because it's a lot of information and a lot of new information potentially.
And also, we will be posting parts of this online. That's why
Yes.
we wanted to make sure that you were all... I don't know why I'm showing you where you're off screen. You're all off screen. So when we're doing the Q&A, if you want to say something, then we'll be able to hear you and you'll be on the recording. And if you don't want to be on the recording, then just type it in and I'll say it for you. So we will be posting this. You will be able to go back over it if you want to.
Mm-hmm. So in this language, we're going to define things particular to the context that we're speaking of them in, right? So in other words, we're going to talk about acknowledgement in a way and define it in a way that maybe you haven't heard before. And not that we're insisting that our definitions are the definitive ones and the only ones in the world that work or are right. But for the purposes of our discussion, the clarity around them is really useful. Okay? So we're going to define acknowledgement as simply this. Acknowledgement is the awareness, okay, that something in your environment could potentially have an effect on you. That's it. The awareness that something in your environment could potentially have an effect on you. Okay? That's acknowledgement. Okay, so that's, we get into the car, We sit down, we close the windows. It's a brisk winter day, and we see a fly on the opposite passenger side window, right? So acknowledging that is saying, there's a fly in the car with me, and all the windows are closed because it's minus 12 and pouring rain. That fly could buzz around and hit me in the head while I'm driving. That fly could produce that buzzing sound that kind of annoys me while I'm trying to have a conversation on the phone with my Bluetooth speaker, and hands-free, of course, as I'm driving to wherever I've got to get to, right? So it's acknowledging that there's something in my present time environment that could potentially have an effect on me. Okay? Sound fair so far? Clear? And if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to jump in. But I'm trying to get through this stuff so that we can have lots and lots of time for questions, so that you guys have some time to think about this stuff as well too. Okay, so that's the first principle, or the first condition that we encounter when we start to feel challenged to make a decision about something, right? Because now I've got to go, do I not turn on the car and start to drive and try to get rid of this fly first? Do I not worry about it because I don't want to be late for my appointment and start driving? And if the fly just sits over there on the passenger side window and doesn't bother me, be okay with that, right? All those things start going through our mind. And that's where we start to feel the pressure and stress of, I've got to make a decision here. Right? I've got to make a choice here. Okay. The next kind of principle or concept that we're going to describe as part of the mechanics of making a good decision, right, or one of the axioms of making a good decision, is acceptance. Right? Another A word, right? What's acceptance? For our purposes, we're going to define acceptance as the recognition of the fact that that thing in my environment that could have an effect on me is having an effect on me. Right? So we move from potential to actual, right? From acknowledgement to acceptance. We're saying, okay, yeah, that thing called the fly on the opposite window is flying around now. Right? It left the window. I started to move off from my parking spot, drive down the road. That little fly decided that that was its cue to start flying around, right? Now I'm distracted by the fly, okay? Because it's now taken the potential of its ability to have an effect on me and actualized it. It's put it in motion. It's hit me in the head a couple times. It's buzzing by my ear. I can hear it, okay? I'm talking on the phone in my conversation. It's hit me in the lip a couple times. It's almost gone in my mouth, right? That's where I'm having to actually acknowledge and recognize the fact that that thing that had the potential to have an effect on me is actually now in motion in present time, having an effect on me. Okay? We've all had situations like that make us up the urgency, right? The feeling of urgency around making a choice about what we're going to do about this thing that's impacting us and creating an effect on us, right? And notice how that urgency grows from when it was on the window, okay, to now it's in motion. Okay, that thing's become actual, right? We feel the pressure. I got to do something about this right now, right? This is where we often find ourselves at the real threshold of what we're going to constantly refer to as a reaction or a response, right? When that thing that we thought might have the potential to have an effect on us is actually having an effect on us in real time, the urgency to make a decision goes up. Okay? If, let's say, for example, we have a phobia of insects, well, we might be much more prone, if we don't have any other mechanism to help us in that situation, no other tool to help us navigate that decision, because that's what choices are, right? Choices are the tool of navigation that we use to decide which way we're going to move through the world, right? Particularly when we face obstacles. If we have a phobia, right? And the reason I'm using that is because a phobia is anchored in fixation and fear, right? So that urgency, that energy of fear, it becomes really powerful. We're probably going to be more prone to react to that situation. What does that look like? That looks like an emotionally driven decision, okay, that requires us to take immediate action, right? That's what things that are urgent push us to do. Okay, so we might start swatting at the fly, right? We might start, speaking out and stupid fly, get away from me, or yelling at the fly, right? Because that's the way that we're trying to keep the fear that we're experiencing from that urgency and that immediacy from completely shutting us down, right? And freezing us in the moment, just like Colleen was talking about a moment ago. Think about it for a second. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. I want your true, and you don't have to answer out loud, but just for yourself, think about it for a minute and think, okay. When I feel that way, how proficient do I feel at making what I would consider a good decision? Right? And whether it's the fly or whether it's any other situation that creates that immediacy, that urgency, and that fear.
This example?
Yes.
So, phobia. I've actually gotten rid of like 96% of my spider phobia.
Amazing.
It was horrific, and I've done a ton of work on
Amazing.
it. I love working with people on phobias because I know what they feel like. And there is still a gentleman who shall remain nameless back home who was a great example of this, because it's that example of when somebody pushes, you push back. In this instance, I feel like he attacked and I attacked back, because in the height of my spider phobia, I pointed out a spider across the room. He went over, picked it up, and said, "What do you want me to do with it?" I said, "Please take it outside." And instead he pretended to trip and throw it towards me. And so my reaction in the moment, because I had zero space in my head because of the phobia to respond, my reaction was, I need to fling something at the spider to get it away from me. And I don't want to fling anything that's attached to me, because then I will touch the spider, and obviously that will destroy life on Earth as we know it. So I was on, back in the old days, kids, phones were big clunky things.
We used to talk on them.
And there was a big clunky phone that I was on, and I had the handset in my hand. And so I just flung it as hard as I could in the general direction of the spider. And that gentleman is still walking around to this day, I believe, with a couple of stitches from where the phone hit him.
Or at least the scar of the stitches.
Yeah, sorry, from the scar of the stitches from where it hit him. So that choice was made instantaneously with full reaction and no response, because the level of fear left me no room. I'm not advocating for that kind of...
He's telling the story with us and the spider.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually probably a really good one.
Maybe at the next point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, lots of cool thoughts going through my head right now, just with Colleen's example. And it reminds me of a story I hope she shares with you later and thinks is appropriate, that involved us and a spider. She didn't throw a phone at me, which was really great. And she responded again extremely well. It was pretty cool. I was very proud of her and very relieved that she didn't react and throw a phone or a fist or something at me with this action that occurred around this particular spider in one of our apartments many years ago. So, okay, we've talked about acknowledgement. We've talked about acceptance, right? And before we go into the third A, right, the other principle or axiom that kind of we can rely upon as being a consistent factor to measure how well we're making decisions in any given moment. And it's interesting about decision making, just really quick. Sometimes we feel really, really put upon to make a decision when we're super stressed, right? When there's lots of urgency and there's lots of immediacy and when there's a fear driving it, right? We feel like, oh my God, I have to make a decision really fast. But I don't know if this is true for you, and I'm curious to see, and I'll certainly say that it's true for me. Sometimes when there's not enough urgency or immediacy, right, or like fear of consequence, I can have a really hard time making a decision there too. I don't know if any of you experience that, right? And that's almost like when it feels like there's too many choices to be made, right? Or there's not any clear direction that says, hey, go this way, right? When you could go this way, this way, this way, this way, or a multitude of ways. Sometimes that can be really stressful too. And it's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum and the other side of the coin that makes decision-making challenging. So the things that we're talking about here apply there as well too, right? And can kind of help us navigate making good decisions and good choices under really high pressure circumstances or really low pressure circumstances where it feels like our decision, and again, I know this, I'll sort of speak for myself here and see if it resonates for any of you, where like there's nothing really urgent or important going on seemingly, and it can just kind of feel like all kind of, loosey-goosey, and that can be difficult to make a decision under those circumstances as well. So when we talk about the third concept, well, yeah, maybe I will do that now and then introduce the other pieces afterwards. It'll make more sense. It'll be complete. So the third part of that process is what we're going to call agreement, right? So we've got acknowledgement, we've got acceptance, and we've got agreement, okay? And what's agreement? Agreement is simply what it sounds like. We decide on some level, whether consciously or unconsciously, right, to go with the momentum of the thing that we just accepted and its impact on us. Right? What does that look like in a practical sense? Okay, I acknowledge that the fly is on the window. Okay, I'm aware that it has the potential to have an impact on me. Okay, I start to drive. I decide, well, okay, I'm going to drive away, and the stupid fly is just going to have to stay there. I got half an hour drive. Hopefully, it won't bother me as I'm trying to get on the freeway. Get on that freeway entrance, and all of a sudden that fly launches and it's buzzing around your head and buzzing around your face and flying all over the car, right? Now that's, if we stay aware of that, we're now in that acceptance stage, right? We're like, okay, that thing that I thought could have a possible effect on me is now actually having an effect on me. The step of agreement is anchored in the idea of, well, what am I going to do now? What's the next decision or the next choice I'm going to make? Am I just going to tolerate and keep driving in a panic and an urgent state of immediate fear with this fly buzzing around my face and head and distracting me because its unpredictable movement is chaotic and scary? Pardon me. Okay. Or am I going to get pushed to that point where I actually stay in the awareness of the fact that the fly could have started bugging me and flying around. It actually is flying around now. That action is actually affecting me a lot to the point where I now can't conduct my conversation or feel like I'm safely driving the car. So if I go into agreement with the impact and the effect that thing that I just accepted and acknowledged is having on me, well, then the necessity for a choice, okay, becomes very, 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 very clear and self-evident. This is where we're going to get back to reacting and responding, right? As whatever it is that's affecting me escalates in its effect, right? As it goes from the potential to the actual to the consistent, if you know what I mean, right? Like it was on the window, wasn't moving around, I'm okay with it. It started to fly around, started to hit me in the face. I almost swallowed it a couple times. It's distracting me while I try to drive. It hit me in the eye and really is causing me a lot of stress. That's the actual. The agreement is, okay, I now cannot deny that this thing is going to keep happening this way if I don't make a choice about how to handle it. So when we react, right, which is a fear-driven energy, right, and its result, if you can follow what I'm saying here, is denial, right? In other words, we just start pretending that we can keep driving the car, okay, while this thing is increasingly adding to our urgency, fear, and immediacy of discomfort or danger, right? And then we'll start swiping at it, and we'll start, yelling at it, and we'll start doing all these things that might make us feel like we're moving the anxiety and the fear, but aren't actually helping us rid ourselves or change how we are experiencing the effect that this thing is having on us, right? So the fly's bugging you, pun intended, and all you can kind of do is keep driving the car and keep bugging the fly, right? You can only do back to it what it's doing to you. Okay? A response.
Do I use the example from that guy?
Actually, yeah.
You can
Yeah,
finish.
yeah. As soon as I'm almost done. But that's a great example, actually. Super smart. Colleen's so smart. Or if I respond, right, what I can do is I can decide to make a different choice, right, than what the fly is doing to me. The fly is distracting and bugging me. In a responsive state, I can pull the car over to the shoulder, right? I can roll the window down and see if it flies out. I can tell the person that I'm speaking to on my Bluetooth speakerphone that I'm sounding agitated and upset because there's a fly in my vehicle and it's driving me crazy. And I'm going to need to handle that, so can I call you back? Right? There's a myriad of choices that we could make to actually land in full acceptance of the fact that this thing that could have had an effect on me is now having an effect on me. And if I continue to just keep reacting to it, the effect that it's having on me is just going to persist and grow. It's going to scare me more. It's going to distract me more. It's going to make my conversation untenable. It's going to make me driving unsafe. So I'm now in that space where I have to accept the fact that I'm not in control here of this thing outside of me called this fly. Okay? I'm only in control of what I choose to do in response to the effect it's having on me. Okay? That's a response. Okay, so now I can, like I said, I can pull over, I can stop the car, I can get out, I can walk around, put my hazards on, open the door, try to get the fly out of there. Okay? So the path of responsiveness, okay, is one of acceptance. Right? And on the continuum, if we look at reaction, being reactionary on the bottom, and being responsive at the top, right, or even left to right, and we look at the steps of acknowledgement, acceptance, and agreement, we're going to start to realize a couple things really quick, and then I'm going to pass it over to Call. One, as I acknowledge, my awareness goes up, right? And then I literally land in acceptance. As I accept, my awareness of my acceptance goes up. So as we move up this sort of chain or this scale, our awareness grows, right? So in other words, we're getting away from this tunnel vision back to, right? We can see more of the whole situation. Okay? When I get to the step of agreement, what I'm landing in is the awareness, okay, that I don't have to go into agreement passively with the thing that's having an effect on me, right? In other words, in tunnel vision, my only choice is stupid fly. I got to get rid of that thing. And I'm going to forget that there's other things that are going on around me, like traffic and cars and a conversation. I'm just going to focus on getting rid of that stupid fly so it's not impacting me anymore. Right? When I'm in awareness of my awareness around, okay, well, yeah, this thing really is bugging me. At the stage of agreement, I remember and recognize that I have a chance and the opportunity to choose to control myself. That's all. Not try to control what's around me, not try to control the circumstances, right? But to control myself. So when we're in fight or flight and we're in a reactionary mode, what we start to rely upon is the idea that my safety in that scenario is only going to come from controlling external factors, right? The things around me, i.e. the fly, right? That's the cause of all this consternation.
It's a terrible fly.
Terrible fly.
You were traumatized by this.
Absolutely traumatized by the fly. Almost ate him a couple times. I'm like, dude, you're not my food. You're not lunch. Okay? But if we can, and we'll talk about this specifically too after Call's example, because I think her example is going to be perfect in describing this. If we can remember that we are safest when we are in full control of our own choices, and remember that we can actually get safe not by controlling the factors around us, but by controlling our action in response to those factors, then all of a sudden we stay connected to our awareness that we don't have to go into agreement with this thing that's happening to us, or feels particularly in that instance like it's happening to us, right? And it's almost in a silly way, real fast, just remembering that this fly's got nothing against me. I don't have to take his action or her action, I guess, technically, personally. The fly's not there to disrupt my life or to make things difficult at all. In fact, in many ways, the fly's kind of doing his own thing. And I think Carl's example is going to illustrate this really beautifully. When we can stay aware enough to remember and recognize that what's happening in the face of our circumstance in the moment, particularly with another human being, has the possibility of being something that is motivated and triggered by them. Actually doesn't have anything to do with us. Okay? That's the space where we're going to start to be able to cultivate a responsive mind, right? And not be limited solely to, well, this person's doing this to me, so the only thing I can do to be safe is do it back to them. Right? Which we all know, in whatever instance we might use as an example, can escalate and escalate and escalate to the point where nobody feels safe.
Now my example.
Yes.
So I'm going to explain this differently because, again, fight response, flight response, freeze response. Actually, all the other Fs. He gets fight, I get all the other Fs of the 5. So in my world, if we look at this from a quantum physics world point of view, if we look at this from, honestly, most first people's point of view, part of this is this idea that, yes, the outside universe impacts us and influences us and changes us, but we have just as much power and capacity to impact and change the outside world. And so for those of you tonight who are going, no, but I'm a flight or freeze person, I'm not going to be able to do this. The fact that you've heard this tonight, the fact that this is now a genuine possibility in your mind, means you actually have 1,000 times more capacity to do this than you had an hour ago. And you don't have to try to force it, and you don't have to panic about remembering it. All you have to do is give yourself that space, give yourself that breath or two, and then allow this to come back. Because this is there now. This is programmed in now. So from my earlier example with the trademark jerk face jerk with the parking spot, I went into an acknowledgement that this could probably have an effect on me. I went into acceptance. This guy is really angry, and he's parked in my parking spot, and he wants to throw down, and he wants to let me know that this is going to be my problem because he has a problem. But I chose not to go into agreement with it. And in that space, I went, yeah, I don't want to have a fight. I don't want to have a fight with this guy. I don't need this to be a feud that ends up like the Hatfields and McCoys. 50 years later, people are singing ballads about it. That's fun in movies. It's not fun in real life. So what can I do instead? What agreement am I going to make? How am I going to impact the external universe? And in that moment, I looked for something in him to see what the other options were. That's when I saw the hand shaking. And I went, oh yeah, he knows he's wrong. He knows he's being a jerk-faced jerk. I'm going to give him the thing that he probably isn't expecting. So he's pushing, I'm not going to push back. I'm just going to be really nice to him. And it screwed him up, like you can tell. And I stopped and I took that breath. And I could still feel myself shaking. It's not like I magically became a different person. But I stopped and I took that breath and I went, okay, my agreement is we're not going to fight about it. I'm making my own agreement right now. And so I went, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I mean, it's terrible around here, isn't it? Now that everybody's driving again, you can't find a parking spot to save your life. You must be so upset. I'm so sorry that you're so upset. I get it. And he went, yeah. Yes. And I just kept deciding on my own agreement with him. And I just kept telling him, you know, he's just a wonderful guy. Tell me more about that. Oh my goodness, I would love to hear more about what's going on with you. And within 5 minutes, he was giving me a lot of information. Within 10 minutes, he was telling me about how much he misses his kids and he wants to move out of the city. Within 15 minutes, he was offering me his parking spot for the rest of the month.
Masterful. She did such a great job with that.
And I wasn't planning on that. All I was doing was taking that breath, giving myself the space to impact the external universe, and deciding on a different agreement. I didn't refused to go into acceptance. I didn't go, no, he's going to be a great guy. Of course he's going to be a great guy, because that wouldn't have worked. I had to really assess where he was at. That's where I got the information from, to ask him the questions I asked him, to offer the information I offered him. And that's what gives us the space to make everything really, really different. And I've spoken to a couple of you lately, and I know the times when you've done that. I don't know if you've given yourself the space to acknowledge that that's what you did. And because you did it that once, you now have, again, more of a pattern to do it again and in other places. How does that feel? And then we have a couple minutes left, and then we're going to do all the questions.
Yes. I know it's a lot of information, guys and ladies, that we're pouring out at you, and it's thrilling to share this information with you. So we appreciate your attentiveness and your patience for holding your questions, for those of you that have them. So, this useful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things to sort of tie this all together in ways that are we hopefully feel simple to you, okay? Because simple is what we're always after. Simple doesn't mean, ineffective or not useful. It just means easily accessible, right? And why do we want things to be simple? We want things to be simple so that we can utilize them in real time. Right? We can utilize them under pressure. We can utilize them at the speed of life. Right? We can have all kinds of cool, fancy concepts that might take us, all kinds of time to memorize and rehearse and practice. But if they're too complex, when we are under the pressure of life, they're gone. Okay? That's as true in jiu-jitsu as it is, I think, in life, right? I remember years ago when I was doing some training out of university in an internship that I worked for an insurance company for. We had to memorize this script, right, of how to talk to people and how to get potential interest out of them buying insurance and investment products. And as soon as you got on the phone with somebody who was either in a bad mood or really, really smart and knew what they were talking about and asked you a question, and you felt the pressure of going, oh man, this is the make or break moment. If I don't say this right, this person's going to hang up on me. All that stuff that you memorized, out the window, right? Or at least that's what happened to me in those moments. And many of the people that I was interning with felt the same way. So simple is what we're after. So to keep this simple, okay, I want you to think of a couple of things, right? Think of the word, and this is almost a mnemonic device, acknowledge, right? And when I think of the word acknowledge, right away I think of the idea of, oh, okay, well, acknowledge means to access knowledge, right? Acknowledge, access knowledge. Okay, well, what's knowledge? Knowledge is the information in your present environment that you can utilize to help you navigate that environment, right? So that's why this idea of awareness is so important, because awareness is driven by acceptance. So in that example with the fly, in Colleen's example, she's aware, okay, that there's information in her environment that if she pays attention to, she'll be able to use it, right? She'll access the knowledge that's available to make a good decision, right? What's a good decision? A good decision is anything that, generally speaking, isn't a reaction, okay? Because a reaction diminishes awareness and puts us more and more on the fast track to the bottom of the scale, which we would call lose-lose, right? Because when you are reacting and then you trigger the other person to react, and then they react, and then you react to their reaction, and then they react to the reaction of your right? Everybody just dwindles, and you feel like all you're doing in that environment is losing. So in other words, we could describe that with the third R word that we talked about earlier, with resistance, right? We have reaction, we have responsiveness, we have resistance. So when we are constantly caught in an automatic reactionary loop, right? All we feel to what we want, which is generally the idea of feeling safer, is more and more resistance occurring, right? The thing's just escalating, but we're sliding down the mountain, because now no one's getting calmer, no one's getting clearer, no one's getting safer, all those things that triggered us into that fear in the first place, that urgency and that immediacy, just get the volume turned up. That's how you know you're caught in a reactionary loop. With yourself, with the person that you're with both of you doing that, okay? The feeling of resistance. What's the feeling of resistance? I don't want to be here anymore. This is terrible. Ah! Right? That's the feeling of resistance. But it also works in the opposite direction as well. Right? When you're moving and building a momentum towards responsiveness, your awareness is expanding, okay? You're not tunnel visioned and focused on the singular factor that's the most triggering. You can see the whole picture, right? You're looking at things with both eyes, not just one or the other, or closed, which is the ultimate denial and fear reaction. And what you will experience more and more and more as you lean into the idea of building your awareness through acknowledgement and acceptance is that the resistance starts to decrease, right? You feel less harried, you feel less pressured, you feel less of an urgent desire to get out of there because you're aware that in the moment you were triggered, the resistance was high. As you acknowledged and accepted that something was having an effect on you, and you stayed aware of the fact that it was having an effect on you, and that if you don't do something, it's going to continue to have an effect on you, right? Your awareness grows, you get more space, and the resistance starts to drop. That doesn't mean that the person who's triggered you or is trying to enforce something on you has changed their behavior necessarily, right? But it means that you are aware that you can change yours. You just don't have to pull if they're pulling. You just don't have to push if they're pushing, right? So that brings us to a simple idea around how do we remember, okay, what the next step is? If acknowledgement is accessing knowledge, right? Acceptance is accessing and maintaining the awareness that that knowledge gave us, right? So acknowledgement is access your knowledge. Access, pay attention to what's going on with you. Be present with it. Acceptance is continue to access and maintain your awareness of that knowledge. So that when you get to the point of agreement, right, which I think of, and hopefully this will be useful for you too, agreement is, just again, we're playing with the word. This is where I mint, right, like I put into place, just like we mint money or we mint gold, I mint my choice, right? I decide for myself, in a self-determined way, how I'm going to proceed in this situation, right? And remember that almost any choice in a situation is better than just your raw reaction. So you don't even have to be perfect at what you're choosing, right? Because really what you're choosing is not to react, right? Reactions are driven by emotion and fear. Responses are full of thoughts and space, right? And that's a way to kind of give yourself some simple, like I said, almost mnemonic devices to remember, that, oh yeah, right, acknowledgement, acceptance, agreement, right? So I'm going to access the knowledge. I'm going to accept the awareness that that knowledge has given me and try to maintain it. I'm going to use that to stay aware that I have a choice here. No matter what's happening in front of me, no matter what this person's delivering to me or trying to enforce upon me, I have a choice about it. And I'm going to make that choice and I'm going to mint it. I'm going to put it in place and through my action and response, show that that's how committed to this choice I'm making I am, right? Which is not to engage.
And it's 8:03.
Yes. 30 seconds. When I used to do a lot of security work. I used to bounce in a lot of bars and pubs, played football in university, and our coach owned a company that did all that kind of work. Any of you that know me in person, I'm a decent sized guy, but some of the guys I played football with were like giant men, right? 6'4", 6'5", 280 pounds plus. I often got put as kind of the head bouncer or at the front door, and my boss told me one day that the reason why he did that was because I was a very hard person to pick a fight with. Very hard. So think about that in this very simple real world example. All these things we're talking about, okay, that allow us to keep space to be responsive and make good choices are kind of in that vein. Picking a fight with someone who doesn't want to fight and isn't trying to fight, but isn't running away either, is very difficult to do. So the person that's trying to pick the fight, i.e. the reactionary enforcer that's trying to control you and feel safe by making sure that you do what they say, if you don't go into agreement with that, it's very, very difficult for that person to maintain that level of aggressiveness and assertiveness towards you and pick a fight with you. So if there's a simple way to kind of distill what we're talking about, that's an example.
You are still very good at that.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
very hard to pick a fight with.
That's good. I'll take that as a compliment. Because I actually don't like
however,
fighting.
I'm very skilled at no. And for those of you who are, like me, more prone to freeze and more prone to flight, everything that we're talking about, it is there now. It is in your ACS, in your autonomic control system. It's in your subconscious. You have access to it, and you don't have to worry about it. If you do want more access to it, then having it around somewhere where it's easy to see, where it becomes a regular pattern for you, type it out, write it out on something, take a picture with your phone, make that your lock screen. So every time you pick up your phone, you see acceptance, awareness, acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement, acceptance, agreement.
What he said.
With all those other words mixed in there too.
What he said.
Those are the three biggies.
Put it on a sticky note, put it on your bathroom mirror, write it on something, put it on the inside of your front door, so every time you go out, you got that lovely little reminder before you go out. And it just keeps little layers of this expanding and expanding and expanding for you. And I've messaged a couple of you, but there are definitely more. I know how well all of you have done this. And now all we're doing is we're giving you the reminder that you can do this at choice, and you can do this consistently, and you have the mechanism for knowing how you did it so you can do it again.
Duplication.
Duplication.